Clifton Powell has appeared in more than 100 films and television shows. You've laughed at him as Pinky in the Friday series. You've watched him hold the screen opposite Jamie Foxx in Ray. You may not know his name, but you know his face. For nearly 5 decades, he has been one of Hollywood's most reliable character actors, and for 4 of those years, he was also fighting a federal lawsuit that threatened to define his legacy for something he says he never did. Here's what actually happened, according to court filings, contemporaneous news coverage, and Powell's own public statements. Not rumor, not dramatized retelling, and not the misleading claim that his sentence is final. He was never sentenced. He was never convicted of anything. What follows is the real story of how an unproven allegation nearly cost a working actor his career anyway. Clifton Powell was born March 16, 1956, and raised in Northeast Washington, D.C., in the Mayfair Mansions housing complex. He attended H.D. Woodson Senior High School before transferring to the Duke Ellington School of the Arts, where he trained seriously in acting for the first time. By his own account, he found his way into performing after seeing a stage production of My Fair Lady as a student, a spark that eventually pulled him away from a neighborhood where, as he's described it in interviews over the years, plenty of the kids he grew up with ended up in prison or worse. He broke into film in 1990 with a small role in House Party, but it was 1993's Menace to Society, the Hughes brothers' unflinching portrait of South Central Los Angeles, that put him on the map as a dramatic actor capable of real menace and real vulnerability in the same scene. From there, the work kept coming. Dead Presidents, 1995, Why Do Fools Fall in Love and Rush Hour, both 1998, Selma, Lord, Selma, 1999, Next Friday, 2000, and Friday After Next, 2002, Woman Thou Art Loosed, 2004. Gamers may also know his voice without knowing his face. He voiced Big Smoke in the landmark 2004 video game Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas. That same year, 2004, brought his highest profile recognition. In Ray, the Jamie Foxx biopic of Ray Charles, Powell played Jeff Brown, Charles's loyal road manager. The performance earned him an NAACP Image Award nomination for Outstanding Supporting Actor Validation in an industry that had not always been generous to him, that his work stood on its own. Powell has also spoken candidly about the racial dynamics he navigated as a working actor. He has said he walked off the 1995 Eddie Murphy film Vampire in Brooklyn after a sound operator on set made racist remarks toward him, and that the production declined to address it. It's a smaller story than the legal battle that would come later, but it speaks to a career built, in his telling, against real friction, not just artistic competition, but the everyday grind of being a dark-skinned black actor in an industry that has long favored lighter-skinned performers for leading and romantic roles. Powell has never shied away from naming that bias directly in interviews, describing casting conversations where his skin tone, not his range, was treated as the obstacle. By the mid-2000s, Powell had shifted increasingly towards smaller, independent, and direct-to-video projects, along with recurring and guest roles on television, Rock, South Central, Army Wives, In the Heat of the Night, NYPD Blue, CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, House. In 2016, he took the role of the primary antagonist on Bounce TV's Saints and Sinners, the network's first original primetime soap. Through it all, he became known in the industry as a dependable, prolific character actor, the guy directors trusted to bring authenticity to almost any role, hero or villain. That reputation, built over decades, is exactly what came under threat in 2012. In September 2012, a woman using the pseudonym Keontae Myers filed a federal civil lawsuit against Powell in the Eastern District of Louisiana, according to reporting at the time from Courthouse News Service and the AFRO American newspapers. Myers, who worked as a cocktail waitress at Harrah's Casino in New Orleans and said she had known Powell for about 2 years, alleged that an encounter with him in a hotel room on August 28 to 29, 2011, began consensually and turned into a sexual assault when she asked him to stop and he did not. She sought more than $75,000 in damages for assault, battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Two things are important to separate here because coverage at the time and the framing of some retellings since has blurred them. First, Myers had reported the incident to New Orleans police in 2011, and that criminal investigation was closed without charges for lack of evidence. Powell was never arrested and never criminally charged. Second, the civil lawsuit that followed in 2012 was a separate matter entirely, governed by a lower evidentiary standard, preponderance of the evidence, rather than the criminal standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Through a representative, Powell denied the allegations from the outset and said he intended to pursue every legal option against his accuser. What happened procedurally next is where the story gets genuinely strange. According to Bossip and theJasmineBRAND, both citing court records, Powell did not respond to the 2012 lawsuit, and in the absence of a response, a federal judge entered a default judgment against him, $150,000 in damages plus roughly $3,095 in medical expenses. For a period, on paper, Powell was on the losing end of a serious civil judgment. But in early 2017, that default judgment was thrown out. U.S. District Judge Sarah S. Vance vacated it after finding two things: that Myers's account contained inconsistencies, and, more decisively, that Powell had never actually been properly served with a lawsuit in the first place, meaning the case had no legal basis to have proceeded to judgment at all. Powell's attorney at the time, Eric Carter, said the original judgment stemmed from a botched defense by Powell's prior counsel, who had left him unaware the suit was even moving forward until he read about it in the media. The reporting from that period also surfaced a detail from the original criminal investigation. According to Bossip, the lead New Orleans police detective on the case swore in an affidavit that when she asked Myers directly whether she had been forced or intimidated into sexual intercourse with Powell, Myers replied that she had not. That statement was central to the original decision not to pursue criminal charges. The case did not end there. Court records from the Eastern District of Louisiana show that after the default judgment was vacated, litigation continued for another year. Powell, for his part, filed counterclaims against Myers for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. In January 2018, the court dismissed those counterclaims as well, not because they lacked merit on the facts, but because Louisiana's one-year statute of limitations for defamation claims had already run out by the time they were filed. In other words, the underlying legal fight ended not with a finding that either party had lied, but with the case closing on procedural and evidentiary grounds. No criminal charges, no surviving civil judgment, and no surviving counterclaim either. Both sides walked away from the courthouse without a verdict on the merits. That is the actual final sentence, and it is not a sentence at all. It's a legal dead end for a case that produced years of headlines but no adjudicated wrongdoing by Powell. Here is the part of the story that Powell himself has talked about more than the legal mechanics, what it cost him while the case was unresolved. Speaking to TMZ in 2017, around the time the default judgment was overturned, Powell said the allegations had cost him work and caused him significant emotional distress in the years the case dragged on. That's consistent with a broader pattern that entertainment reporters and legal analysts have long observed. Because civil suits operate on a lower evidentiary bar than criminal cases, and because studios and networks are risk-averse about any actor whose name is attached to a headline, regardless of the outcome. The mere existence of an allegation can function as a career penalty independent of what a court eventually decides. Powell wasn't convicted of anything, but for the years the case was active, he was, in practical terms, treated by parts of the industry as though the outcome had already been decided. That's worth sitting with, because it says something uncomfortable about how public reputation and legal reality can diverge. A dismissed case, a vacated judgment, an investigation closed for lack of evidence. None of that undoes lost bookings, canceled appearances, or the years spent under a cloud with no timeline for when it might lift. Powell's own comments to TMZ suggest he experienced exactly that gap between legal vindication and professional cost. Away from the legal fight, Powell's life has had its share of difficulty that he has spoken about more openly than most actors of his stature. He is married to Kimberly Powell, and the couple has 2 children, Clifton Jr. and Maya. Clifton Jr. has followed his father into filmmaking, and the two have worked on creative projects together. Powell has also built a life outside acting. He and his wife have owned restaurants in the Pasadena, California area, Clifton's Gourmet Barbecue and the Gourmet Cobbler Factory, and he has taught acting at the SAE Institute in Atlanta. According to recent coverage of his finances, his estimated net worth as of 2025 sits around $400,000, a modest figure for an actor with his volume of credits, reflecting a career built more on steady supporting work than blockbuster paychecks. Now in his late 60s, Powell remains an active working actor, continuing to take on studio and independent roles alike, and mentoring younger people interested in entertainment careers. Fans have speculated for years about whether he might reprise his most famous role, Pinky, in a potential Friday franchise revival. As of now, that remains unconfirmed either way. Videos and articles that frame Powell's story as a final sentence or a career-ending downfall get the facts backward. The truth is less sensational and, in its way, more important. A working actor spent years fighting a lawsuit that was ultimately undone by procedural failure and evidentiary problems, not resolved by a finding of guilt. The criminal investigation closed for lack of evidence. The civil default judgment was vacated because Powell was never properly served. His own counterclaims were dismissed on a technicality, not on their merits. No court ever found that Clifton Powell committed the acts he was accused of. What actually ended, if anything ended, was a period of uncertainty that lasted the better part of a decade, one that cost Powell professional opportunities and, by his own account, real emotional weight, before finally closing without a definitive legal verdict against him. That's a story about how allegations can outrun evidence in the public eye, and about an actor who kept working through it. It is not a story about a sentence, final or otherwise. Powell's actual legacy is the one built across more than 100 credits, an NAACP nomination, and a reputation among directors and audiences as one of the most dependable character actors of his generation, a legacy the facts, when you actually check them, leave intact. Sources: Courthouse News Service, 2012, RAFRO American Newspapers, 2012, IB Times UK, 2012, Bossip, 2017, theJasmineBRAND, 2017, U.S. District Court, Eastern District of Louisiana, Case Number 2:12, CV-02181, SSV, MBN, 2018 ruling. Wikipedia entry on Clifton Powell, Yahoo Entertainment / Celebrity Net Worth Coverage, 2025.